I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this, but here I am, typing at 3 a.m. because sleep just won't come. My wife and I have been together for 8 years, married for 5. No kids by choice. We always said we wanted freedom, time, and quiet. I thought we had all three. For most of our marriage, things looked normal from the outside. We both worked, paid the bills, went on trips, argued about stupid stuff like whose turn it was to buy groceries. She had a temper, always did. Sharp tongue, quick to snap, dramatic over small things. I told myself that was just her personality. She's passionate, I'd say. She just feels things deeply. Looking back, that was my first lie to myself. About a year ago, she started using Uber and taxis constantly. At first it made sense. She changed jobs, her hours became weird, and sometimes she didn't want to drive. Then it became a habit. Same time every morning. Same time every evening. She even stopped asking me for rides, which honestly felt like a relief at the time. She talked about one driver a lot. Too much. His name slipped into conversations like he was some annoying coworker I was supposed to know. Oh, Alex said traffic was crazy today. Alex took a shortcut again. I remember joking once. Sounds like you're dating your driver. She exploded. Full-on hysterics. Accused me of being controlling, paranoid, insecure. I apologized just to keep the peace. That became the pattern. Any question turned into a fight. Any curiosity was an accusation. She lied about little things too. Where she was, why she was late, why her phone was always on silent. The lies were sloppy, but delivered with such confidence and anger that I doubted myself instead. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. Late nights. Sudden gym obsession. New clothes I never saw her wear around me. Phone glued to her hand. Screen always angled away. But I trusted her. Or maybe I just trusted the version of our marriage I wanted to believe in. At that point, I still thought my biggest problem was her temper. A few weeks after my stupid joke about her dating the driver, things got worse instead of better. She became aggressive in a way I'd never seen before. Not physical, verbal, emotional, constant pressure. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. If I asked how her day was, she'd sigh dramatically and say I was interrogating her. If I stayed quiet, she'd accuse me of being cold and distant. The Uber trips multiplied. Morning, evening, sometimes midday, sometimes just running out for coffee turned into a 2-hour disappearance. When she came back, she smelled different. Not perfume, something sharper, like someone else's cologne mixed with her shampoo. When I mentioned it once, casually, she snapped that I was imagining things and maybe I should see a therapist. She started lying about things that didn't even matter. I'd ask, "Did you eat already?" She'd say no, then I'd find a receipt in her bag. I'd ask where she was, she'd say work, then accidentally mention a place across town later. When I caught these contradictions, she'd either deny them outright or flip the situation on me, crying and yelling until I backed off. What really messed with my head was how convincing she was. She'd cry on command. Shake. Say I was hurting her. Say she felt unsafe. Say I was becoming someone she didn't recognize. I started questioning my own memory. I even apologized for things I knew I hadn't done. One night, she came home unusually calm. Too calm. She dropped her bag, went straight to the shower, and left her phone on the kitchen counter. That never happened. Ever. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't touch the phone. I just stared at it like it might explode. When she came out, she saw me looking at it and immediately stiffened. Asked why I was hovering. I said I wasn't. She grabbed the phone, locked it, and laughed nervously. Then she picked a fight over something completely unrelated. Dirty dishes, I think. It felt rehearsed, like she needed noise to cover something up. That night, lying next to her while she slept peacefully, I realized something had shifted inside me. I didn't trust her anymore. Not fully. Not blindly. The next day, without telling her, I took the afternoon off work. I decided to follow her. I know it sounds paranoid, and I hate that part of me that did it, but something in my gut screamed that I needed to know the truth. She left the apartment around 8:15 a.m., exactly like every other morning. I stayed in my car across the street, engine off, heart hammering. She walked to the usual pickup spot, tapped her phone, and within minutes, a black sedan pulled up. I recognized it immediately. It had the same tiny scratch on the passenger side mirror she had mentioned months ago when telling a story about a careless driver. Alex. The same driver she'd been talking about constantly. They didn't just chat. They laughed. She leaned in, whispered something, touched his arm. My chest tightened. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I had to see it all. She slid into the car, and he pulled away. I followed at a distance, careful not to get noticed. They didn't go to work, not at all. They drove through quiet neighborhoods, parked at a little coffee shop for half an hour, then drove again, taking back roads I didn't know existed. Every stop felt like a page in a story I wasn't supposed to read. My stomach was in knots. It wasn't just the closeness. It was the way she smiled at him, leaned in, laughed like she hadn't in years. She hadn't looked at me that way in. I couldn't even remember. When they finally parked in some secluded area, she got out of the car, and that's when I saw it. His hand on her waist. Her hand on his chest. They kissed. A long, slow kiss. Not a peck. Not a playful brush. They were lost in it. I felt like my whole life just snapped. The apartment, the arguments, the trust, it all evaporated in that single moment. I wanted to confront her right there, scream, throw things. But I stayed in the shadows, watching, recording in my head every detail I knew I'd need later. Then she got back in the car, waved, and drove off, just like nothing had happened. I drove home in a daze, barely remembering the route. She was waiting, calm, smiling like she always did after these trips. I asked her where she had been. She rolled her eyes, said she had errands, like I always do. I nodded, said nothing, because I knew. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The next few days were hell. I couldn't act like I didn't know. My mind kept replaying that kiss, her hands, the way she laughed at him like I'd never made her laugh in years. But I couldn't confront her yet. Not without proof. Not while my blood was still boiling. She seemed oblivious, or maybe she was just good at pretending. She flirted with me sometimes, in that manipulative way she always did, touching my arm, laughing at my jokes, leaning close. But now, every gesture felt fake, poisoned. I saw through her charm, and it made me furious and sad all at once. I started checking her phone when she wasn't around. Every time I saw a notification from Alex, my stomach dropped. The messages were full of little jokes, innuendos, and photos she probably thought I'd never see. I didn't reply. I didn't confront her. I just collected. Then came the day she completely lost control. She came home screaming about nothing. Well, something trivial. I hadn't taken out the trash. Her voice was shrill, hysterical, accusing me of being lazy, uncaring, a terrible husband. She cried, slammed doors, threw clothes across the bedroom. I just stood there, silent. She finally stopped, breathing hard, glaring at me. "Why are you staring at me like that?" she demanded. "I'm not," I said. "You are. You're judging me. You always judge me," she yelled. I stayed quiet, letting her spiral. She finally stomped out of the room, muttering about leaving for a walk. She didn't know I was already planning my next move. That evening, I called in a favor from a friend who knew a private investigator. I wanted answers, real, undeniable answers. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. By the next day, the investigator had tracked her Uber patterns, her usual stops, and even set up discreet surveillance. Every detail I had feared was confirmed. Alex wasn't just a driver she saw occasionally. He was her boyfriend, her lover. I sat in my apartment staring at the photos the PI sent. There they were, lunch dates, hand-holding, kisses. They even went to a hotel, something I hadn't expected, something that shattered any last thread of trust one had left. I finally realized she wasn't just cheating. She had been building this life outside of me for months, probably longer. Every lie, every fight, every dramatic breakdown, just a smokescreen. And I knew I couldn't stay, but I also knew I had to play this smart. Because the moment I confronted her, her true chaos would erupt, and I didn't want to be caught in the storm unprepared. I had to wait. I had to plan. And when I did, everything would explode. I just didn't know when. A week later, she started acting even stranger. Almost as if she knew something, but not exactly what. She was extra affectionate some days, cold and distant the next. The swings were exhausting, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to tip her off that I knew. Then came the night that made everything real. She said she was going to a friend's birthday party, something I didn't know about. I offered to come along, and she laughed like I was insane. "Why would you ruin my night?" she snapped, slamming the door behind her. Classic overreaction, exactly what I expected from her. I followed, of course. Not right on her tail this time. Too obvious. I drove slowly, a block or two behind. She called an Uber as usual, and that's when my blood ran cold. He showed up. Alex. The driver. The boyfriend. They didn't just hug. They clung to each other like no one else existed. I followed them across town, past quiet streets and dimly lit bars, until they stopped at a little dive motel. She got out, handed him a small bag, and they went inside. I sat in my car, fists clenched, stomach in knots. This wasn't casual. This wasn't just flirting with the driver. This was full-blown, secret life cheating. When I got home that night, she was acting like nothing had happened. She cooked dinner, poured wine, chatted about work nonsense, and smiled that manipulative, flawless smile of hers. I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. I just watched her, memorizing every detail for later. I started planning my confrontation. Not a shouting match, not a messy scene, something that would leave her no escape. She had lied, manipulated, gaslighted me for months, maybe even longer. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I decided to document everything. Screenshots of her messages, photos from the PI, records of her trips, receipts. Every little piece of evidence that would make the truth undeniable. She had no idea what was coming. And deep down, I felt the cold satisfaction of finally having the upper hand. Little did I know, she had already started plotting her own version of chaos. Things blew up faster than I expected. 2 days after the motel night, she came home early, which never happened anymore. I was in the kitchen when the door slammed so hard the walls shook. She stormed in already crying, already angry, already performing. Before I could say a word, she accused me of cheating. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. That set her off completely. She started screaming that I'd been distant, cold, emotionally abusive. Said she felt like I was hiding something, that I'd been acting guilty. She threw in buzzwords she'd clearly practiced somewhere: gaslighting, neglect, emotional abandonment. It was surreal listening to her describe herself without realizing it. When I didn't react the way she wanted, she escalated. Full hysteria. Tears, shaking, pacing the apartment. She said maybe she needed space. Maybe she should stay somewhere else for a while. Then, like a switch flipped, she accused me of trying to trap her in a miserable marriage. I calmly asked, "Where would you go?" She froze for half a second. Just half. Then said, "A friend's." Lie. Automatic. Too fast. That night, she slept on the couch and locked her phone like it contained state secrets. Around 2 a.m., I heard her whispering on a call. I didn't need to hear the words to know who it was. The next morning, she was suddenly sweet. Made coffee, kissed my cheek, told me she loved me, asked if we could start fresh. I almost admired the audacity. That afternoon, I got an email from the PI. More photos, more dates. One photo stopped me cold. Her in the back seat of the taxi, parked, windows fogged up, her hand on his arm, her face turned toward him. The timestamp was from last week, during one of her worst, "you're controlling me" meltdowns. That was the moment something inside me snapped into clarity. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't sad. I was done. That evening, she announced she was going out to clear her head. I nodded and watched from the window as she got into the same taxi, with the same man, like she had nothing to lose. I grabbed my keys. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The truth was about to collide with her lies head-on. I followed her again. This time, I didn't hide as much. I had had enough of tiptoeing around her lies. The streets were quiet, and the cold night made every red light feel like a countdown. She didn't notice me. She was too busy laughing at something Alex said, leaning forward in the seat, hand brushing his knee. They stopped at a small 24-hour diner. She got out first, dramatically flipping her coat over her shoulder like she was in a movie. I watched from across the street as they slipped inside, sat in a corner booth, and whispered for nearly an hour. Every laugh, every touch, every glance, I burned it into memory. Then, suddenly, she stormed out. Not calm this time, furious. She slammed the door behind her, hissing into the phone, throwing her bag onto the hood of the car, pacing in front of it. Alex tried to calm her, but she shoved him away and screamed at him. "I can't deal with this tonight. Just go." She got back into the driver's car alone. I followed. We drove through empty streets, and she suddenly pulled over, parked, and stormed out. I kept my distance, heart pounding. And then I saw it. She met him halfway down the block, grabbed his shirt, yelled, and kissed him so violently it made my stomach churn. But then she screamed again, slapped his chest, cursed him out in a string of words I couldn't process fast enough, and stormed back to the car. I realized in that moment that she was a hurricane. Chaotic, destructive, impossible to reason with. She didn't just lie, she thrived on it. Every accusation, every hysterical outburst, every twisted version of reality she threw at me over the past months, that was her world. And I had been living in it, blind. By the time she finally drove home, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't a confrontation. This wasn't a fight. This was the end. And I couldn't wait for the moment she finally realized that. Because soon, she would be the one scrambling, lying, and defending herself, and I'd have the proof to back up every word. The divorce wouldn't just be messy. It would be complete. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, she was unusually quiet. No yelling, no theatrics, no dramatic, "I can't believe you're like this" meltdown. Just cold smiles and exaggerated sweetness. She poured coffee, asked about my day, and even touched my arm gently. I wanted to throw up. I played along. For now. By mid-afternoon, I started sending out emails and messages. Lawyer consultations, documentation, proof of the affair. Screenshots, photos, timestamps, all neatly organized. Every little lie she had told me, every meltdown, every emergency she had manufactured, I had evidence. She started noticing the distance. Her voice, her tone, the subtle way she watched me. One minute she'd smile, the next she'd accuse me of being moody. Classic manipulations. I nodded, agreed, stayed calm. Let her exhaust herself. Then it happened. The phone rang. Alex. Her phone lit up with a call she ignored, then tried to hide. I saw the panic flash in her eyes for the first time. She tried to laugh it off. "Oh, just work," she said. But her voice cracked. The calm facade was slipping. By evening, she had spiraled completely. Screaming, crying, pacing, slamming doors. She accused me of being controlling, paranoid, obsessive. She claimed she was done with this toxic environment, and maybe she'd move out for a few days, just to breathe. I let her rage. I didn't react. I didn't defend myself. I just watched and waited. And then, like a switch, she switched tactics. Hysterical guilt trips, sobbing, promises that she'd never see him again, that she loved only me. I held the evidence in my hand and smiled quietly, because I knew she was lying. Every word, every promise, every tear. She had lied, cheated, and gaslighted me for months. And now, the game was over. I just needed to make sure the next move was hers, and that she couldn't talk her way out of what was coming. The next day, I decided to escalate. Not out of anger. Well, maybe a little, but mostly to make sure she couldn't spin this. I sent her an email. "We need to talk. Tonight. At home." She arrived in a storm, naturally. Hair wild, eyes blazing, dressed like she had rehearsed some dramatic scene. She started immediately with accusations. "You're being unreasonable, controlling, obsessive." I stayed calm, leaned back in my chair, and watched. "You don't trust me," she screamed, pacing. "You think I'm cheating." "I know you're cheating," I said flatly. Silence. She froze, blinking at me like she'd misheard. You what?" she stammered, voice cracking. "I know about Alex," I said. "Every text, every lunch, every motel. I have proof." Her face went white, then red, then twisted into a sneer. "You're insane. You're crazy." I slid the printed photos across the table, each one clear as day. Her hand on his, leaning close, kissing, laughing. She blinked. Then she screamed, hysterical and furious. How dare you? This is fake. Photoshop. Set up. You're trying to ruin me." I let her scream. I let her throw herself at the walls, the furniture, her phone. She accused me of stalking, harassment, and inventing stories. I stayed calm. Every lie, every accusation, every hissy fit she threw, it was all recorded, all documented. After an hour of chaos, she collapsed onto the couch, shaking, breathing hard, whispering threats and excuses. Then she looked at me, eyes wild. "You're going to regret this," she said. I didn't respond. I just watched. Because now, for the first time in months, she had nowhere to hide. And I knew, deep down, she had finally realized she was losing control. The storm wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. But the first cracks were showing, and I was ready for them to widen. The following days were a psychological war zone. She oscillated between hysterical drama and fake sweetness like a pendulum on meth. One minute she was crying, begging me to forgive her, swearing she'd never see Alex again. The next, she was slamming doors, throwing her phone, screaming about how I was ruining her life. She started gaslighting harder than ever. "You're imagining things," she'd hiss. "You're paranoid. Maybe you're the one cheating." Every lie, every manipulation, came faster and sharper than before. She wanted to destabilize me, to make me doubt my own proof, my own memory. I stayed unmoved, calm, collected. She didn't expect that. She never had to face consequences for her chaos before. One night, she tried a new tactic, charm. She cooked dinner, poured wine, laughed at my jokes, touched my arm, leaned in with that manipulative smile. I ate in silence, letting her think she was winning me back. Later, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Can't we just forget this? You're tearing us apart over nothing," she said, voice dripping honey. I looked at her, straight into her eyes. "Nothing? You've been cheating on me for months. I have proof. Every text, every meeting, every motel. It's all here." I tapped the stack of evidence I had collected. Her face twisted. She went from shock to furious in a heartbeat. You can't. That's private. You have no right." I didn't flinch. "I have every right. And I'm filing for divorce." Her scream shattered the quiet of the apartment. She ran to the living room, threw herself onto the couch, pounding the cushions, crying, shrieking. "You're insane. You'll regret this. You'll never find anyone like me." I watched. Let her spiral. Every word, every scream, every lie she spat out became another brick in the case I would use to protect myself. By the end of the night, she was exhausted, collapsed on the couch, whispering half-hearted threats and promises. For the first time, I felt a sense of relief, because the chaos she had built around me for months was finally contained. And the final act, her losing, was only just beginning. The next morning, she tried a new approach. Silence. Cold, calculating, loaded silence. She avoided my eyes, barely spoke, and every small gesture felt deliberate, like she was testing me, trying to see if By now, she was grasping at straws. Every little thing I did was met with suspicion, and every move she made felt staged. She started leaving notes around the apartment, apologies, declarations of love, half-hearted promises that she'd change. I collected them all, photographing each one as proof of her attempts to manipulate me. One evening, she tried her most desperate move yet. She called Alex while I was in the other room, loudly enough that I could hear. Her voice was sweet, but the words were frantic. "No, we can't meet tonight. Things are falling apart at home. I'm serious." She slammed the phone down, glared at me, and tried to act as if nothing had happened. I walked over slowly, holding the stack of evidence in my hands. "You can't hide anymore," I said calmly. Her face twisted with panic. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I spread out the photos, the texts, the receipts, the timelines of her lies. Every carefully crafted alibi she had, every hysterical meltdown, every casual touch with Alex. It was all documented. She went from panic to rage in seconds. This is insane. You're fabricating everything." "I never." "You did," I interrupted. "Every single thing. And now it's over." She screamed, threw herself at the table, and shouted that I was destroying her life. But I didn't flinch. I stayed calm, letting her rage bounce off me. For the first time, I realized just how manipulative and toxic she truly was. Not just a cheater, but someone who thrived on chaos, someone who could twist reality with her words. And yet, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the truth this time. I knew the divorce would be messy. I knew she would fight, scream, and lie. But I also knew I had all the cards, and I wasn't afraid to play them. A few days later, she started panicking. I could see it in her eyes. The frantic energy that used to make me question my sanity had turned into pure fear. She realized I wasn't going to back down. I had evidence, patience, and control, things she had never had over me before. She tried to spin a story to my friends, claiming I was obsessed, paranoid, and overreacting. She sent texts to family members, painting herself as the victim of a controlling, mistrusting husband. But I was ready. I had copies of every conversation, every lie, every manipulation. I sent them to everyone she contacted, carefully and quietly. Her world started unraveling. Friends who had once supported her were asking questions, checking facts, and suddenly, the web of lies she had built was visible to everyone. Then came the final straw. She tried to meet Alex in secret, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I did. I followed them to a parking garage, silent and steady, watching as they embraced, whispered, and kissed like teenagers sneaking around. When she saw me at a distance, she panicked, screaming, waving her arms, trying to cover him with her body, but it was too late. I had the photos, timestamps, everything. There was no excuse now, no escape. She stormed back home, slamming doors, screaming, crying. She ranted about how unfair I was, how I was ruining her life, how she deserved better. I stayed in the living room, calm, arms crossed, letting her tirade wash over me. Finally, exhausted, she collapsed onto the couch, shaking, muttering half-hearted threats and desperate pleas. And for the first time, I felt the complete weight of control in my hands. She had lied, cheated, manipulated, and screamed. And now, she was powerless. I just had to make sure she never got up again. The next morning, she tried a different tactic, false calm. She smiled sweetly, made coffee, even complimented me on some trivial thing. But I knew better. Every gesture, every word was calculated, desperate, trying to worm her way back into control. I watched her carefully. Every glance, every hesitation, every little nervous tick told me she knew the end was near. I laid out all the evidence on the kitchen table, the photos, the texts, the receipts, the detailed timeline. She froze. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted, looking for some escape, some angle, some lie she could spin. But there was none. I've documented everything, I said calmly. Every lie, every meltdown, every affair. I'm filing for divorce. You can scream, cry, manipulate all you want, but it's over. Her face twisted from shock to fury in seconds. She threw herself at the table, knocking papers everywhere, screaming that I was insane, obsessed, ruining her life. She accused me of stalking, of setting her up, of trying to control her freedom. I let her rage, calmly picking up the scattered evidence, organizing it again. She went from hysterics to tears in minutes, sobbing and accusing me of being cruel. Then, suddenly, she tried to charm me, crawling toward me, trying to coax me with fake apologies and promises she knew I wouldn't believe. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just watched as the hurricane of her chaos burned itself out. By the end of the night, she was exhausted, slumped on the couch, muttering threats and empty promises. And for the first time in months, I felt a strange relief. The storm was over. But I knew the legal battle was only beginning. She wouldn't go quietly. She would fight, scream, lie. But now, I had the proof. And this time, she wouldn't win. The day I filed for divorce, she was a mess. Not just a hysterical mess, but a full-on meltdown hurricane. Screaming, crying, throwing things, pacing, accusing me of everything from being controlling to being a monster for not believing her. I stayed calm, collected, watching her spiral, knowing every lie, every accusation, every outburst was recorded, documented, and ready for court. She tried everything: charm, manipulation, guilt, even false accusations of stalking. None of it worked. Every claim she made was easily disproved with the proof I had. Every attempt to make me doubt myself backfired. The court case was messy, yes, but nothing like the emotional chaos she had unleashed in our apartment over months. She screamed in front of the judge, threw fits, and tried to twist the story, but I stayed quiet, presenting the evidence systematically. The texts, photos, receipts, and a detailed timeline of her affairs and lies left no room for doubt. The divorce was finalized in my favor. She tried to walk out of court proud and defiant, but the truth had caught up with her. Alex? She'd have to sort that mess out on her own. I drove home afterward, for the first time in over a year, feeling free. It hurt, sure. Betrayal cuts deep. But the constant fear, doubt, and manipulation were gone. The wife I thought I knew, the woman who screamed, lied, and charmed her way through my life, was finally just a chapter one could close. And as I unpacked the last box from our apartment, I realized something. I survived. I stayed calm. I documented. I waited. And I won.